And we'll first have a roll call, but
Recording in progress.
I want to introduce our new liaison, Mr. Oscar Gutierrez. Thank you for joining us. And Raymond, can you do a roll call, please?
Chair James Marston,
Here.
Vice Chair Robert Burnham, Skylar Kovich, Nick Kuntz,
Here.
Karen Luckett, Michael Rasler,
Here.
Suzanne Tejada,
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, Brian Damore,
Here.
Daniel Henschke, Sarita King.
Here.
Thank you.
And I guess we can get right to the business here. We'd like to have a presentation from the group of the State Street Consulting.
I just wanted to let the staff and board or committee know that the telephone code on the agenda is again invalid, precluding anyone from phoning in and participating. I was informed by a member of the public.
Nick, you said again, was it the same code that was invalid last time?
I have a sense that this person who's repeating has had this experience before.
Okay. Sarita, do you know how to get that adjusted? Or do you know what the problem is?
If that person could contact me, I did check to make sure that the telephone code was correct, so maybe they're looking at an old agenda. But if you could have them contact me via email, I will make sure to send them the correct code, or even sign them up as an attendee if they'd like. Thank you.
I hope that person is listening to the live feed and got the message to contact Sarita.
And if not, please contact me after this meeting and we will make sure.
While we're on bookkeeping, I want to report that someone told me that they get a automatic update to our web page or to our agendas, and it said at the bottom, if you have any problems, contact Ashley Shue. So I don't know who presents that page, but that needs to be changed back to Brian. So, Sarita, I'm not sure who's in charge of that page, but that's what happened when you get an automatic, when you sign up for the group. You're told to contact Ashley.
I believe that has been corrected, but I will double make sure. And thank you very much for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you. All right, we're going to have a presentation from the consulting group about the State Street changes, and I wanted to just say the reason I and others called for this was we saw a few months ago they talked about, you've talked to 10 stakeholder groups, and again, we're out in the cold. We never were contacted. I'd like to know what other groups of disabled you've talked to, but this group here has never been asked about anything, so we'd appreciate some specifications on that. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, Chair Marston, if I can, I'd like to just introduce the team and this item. And I do thank the committee for the comments that they provided when we last met, because I did hear there was a strong interest in providing more direct input to the team that is working on this project. And so following that meeting, I reached out to Tess Harris, and she was been very accommodating, very willing to try to come in here and do this special meeting to meet specifically with the Access Advisory Committee and not simply invite the committee to come to one of the many public meetings that they've been doing over the past several months. So I appreciate the willingness to come in here, and myself, I'm also looking forward to hearing from them and opening up this opportunity for input. As you know, we do have a member from this committee who is on the advisory committee, but there's nothing really to replace this direct interaction. So looking forward to it, and I'm just going to pass it along here to Tess Harris, who is the State Street Master Planner on staff, and Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Good morning, committee members. It's great to be before you today. I'm Tess Harris. I'm the city's State Street Master Planner. With me also today is Matt Shawaker. He's with MIG, the consulting firm that the city's hired. So Matt and I will be doing this presentation jointly. And then also with us is Timmy Bolton. He's the project planner for this State Street project as well. And so he's here to help answer questions and help us along with the presentation. And so I want to start off today with a quick outline of what we're going to be talking about. So we'll be talking about some of the engagement efforts that we've had over the last few months. We'll talk about the existing conditions analysis that the team has started to work on and really understand. And then we're going to start to talk through the emerging trends, what we're starting to see from the survey responses that we've gotten so far and some of the design workshops that we had in December, and what the next steps are in this project. And so why this slide is really to set the stage for why the city is doing the master plan. So back a couple years ago, City Council directed staff to begin the master plan process, really thinking bigger and bolder than many communities throughout the country. So we are looking beyond a parklet program. Many communities are, during COVID and since COVID, have implemented a parklet program or outdoor dining program similar to what we have today, and that's what I would call the present situation that we have. But we are really looking at what could downtown be in the next 20 to 30 years. What is that future vision that we want our downtown and our community to really have as a public space for everybody? One of the really keystones for this project that's a little bit different than other city projects is the level of community engagement that we're really trying to emphasize. So trying to not only have events on State Street and in the project area, but also to try to go to different community groups and go to individual stakeholders, whether that be businesses or property owners or members of the public, and have conversations to really understand what it is that people want, what things are working, what things aren't working. And you'll see at the end of this presentation, where we're going to spend most of the time, we really want to have a discussion with the Access Advisory Committee on what it is you hope to see downtown in the future and how you engage in the space currently, and what kind of things the design team should really be considering as we look at design concepts going forward. So this is the project area that we're working with. We're looking from Sola down to the Highway 101 underpass, and then over from Chapala to Anacapa Street. State Street is in the center. And I'm going to pass it off to Matt now to talk about some of the existing conditions work that he's done.
Great, thanks, Tess, and thank you all. It's great to be here and speak with you guys. As Tess mentioned, we've gone through, we are at basically the stage of existing conditions. We've done a lot of outreach to talk about what people want to see, how they move, how they come to State Street, how they move around. So just wanted to emphasize that we have not developed any concepts yet. Is this? I could stand closer if that helps. We haven't developed any concepts yet. We're just starting to get into that phase, so it's great to talk to you because we really want to understand how you all experience the public realm, the streets, how you move with it, and what features and elements would really be helpful as we think about a future state for State Street. So first part of the existing conditions, we looked at the urban fabric, transportation, mobility, economics. Urban fabric, you have obviously an incredible urban fabric here, identifiable character to downtown, anchored by, all of the historic buildings and the historic district, great frontages along the street that activate the street. So really a great base to start from for any vision. Multimodal access, this diagram has a lot of arrows, but what that really says is downtown is well connected through many, many modes for pedestrians, for wheelchair, for bike, for transit, for all of it. It's a well-connected place. We need to talk about in the future how those modes work to make sure we meet the goals of a future State Street. Economic development. It's a great place. So State Street and downtown have a great base to build on and continue on, to grow sort of a strong experience, which would be then the basis for continued retail, restaurant, and other things. As you can see, some details. Restaurant and bars are the top economic performers on the street. Specialty retail is the only category that has declined, but I think the real interesting and one of the key findings from our economics consultant is these trends started before the pandemic. There's a lot of talk about what the pandemic has done to retail and to downtowns, but all of these trends were pre-pandemic. Utilities, there are a lot of, they're embedded throughout downtown. So for the most part, they support the vision. There does need to be stormwater improvements for water quality and drainage capacity likely to meet a vision.
Great, thanks, Matt. I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the community engagement efforts so far, and I mentioned it a moment ago, but really I want to emphasize that we are trying to go out into the community and really understand what it is that people from, as Matt will tell you, ages 8 to 80 really want to see in a public space. So we started, we've had a couple different events, and one of the first things I'll highlight is we released a survey the first week of November that asked people what types of experiences, activities, and transportation modes, what types of things people wanted to see in the downtown area in the future. So lots of different questions. We were able to glean from that some key trends that Matt will talk about in a minute. And then we had about 100 different community events or stakeholder meetings over the last 5 months, and have reached almost, about 1,500 people from those events, and then about 6,000 from the visioning survey that we've done. We went out to different places in the community. So we had a couple open house events at Our Lady of Guadalupe. We went out to Foodland and connected with people there. We made sure to reach out to the Santa Barbara Unified School District, so all of the schools got notified on the project, and staff went out to primarily the middle school age or junior high school age, and had conversations with students on what they hoped to see in the community and specifically downtown. And then we really worked with the library, both in doing activations of events on State Street. So we had the library on the Go Van down on State Street, along with different types of art activities and things that community members could engage in for free. And then we also went to some of the library events at Central Library and communicated with people that went to those events on what the survey was. So this slide shows you a little bit about the visioning workshop that we had on November 3rd and 4th. This event was held at a vacant storefront on the 1200 block of State Street. We had about 500 people participate over the 2 days, which we were really thrilled about. And some of the things we particularly enjoyed were hearing why people love State Street, what it is that really brings people downtown. And then there were poster activities where you see in the photo on the top right-hand side, there are dots on some of the different questions that we had in the survey. So people could take the survey in person, right on the posters, as well as digitally during that visioning workshop. And then in December, we held design workshops at another vacant location on State Street on the 800 block this time. We had about 300 people attend those 3-hour events, and the event started with a presentation on some of the existing conditions efforts, and we had posters out during the design workshop showing people what types of trends we're starting to see from the survey. Then we broke everybody up into teams of about 8 to 10 people, and had each team work together for about 2.5 hours or so, really talking through what they wanted to see in terms of mobility in the entire project area. So understanding how people move and what people's responses or reactions were to having different types of systems. So whether that's a transit service, bike lanes or bike routes, where pedestrian areas, where people wanted to see pedestrian areas, or where people wanted to see vehicles. And then we went into a block scale exercise. So we asked each group to look at 2 to 3 blocks of State Street. They were assigned them the blocks randomly, and got into a little bit more detail. You can start to see that on the right-hand photo on this slide as well. But each group either took out from markers, just used the trace paper and started to draw out what they wanted to see. We also had cutouts for people to show where they wanted to have the mobility services or where they wanted to have different activities like seating or play spaces, other things that that might attract a larger community base into our downtown area. And from that, we had about 25 presentations. So at the end of each design workshop, we had a representative from each group come up and present what the group talked about and what different issues they worked through. And we're working through about 100 sketches from those events, really trying to understand all of that data along with the survey data as well. And so Matt will talk a little bit about some of the trends from those workshops and from the survey and from some of the other community outreach that we're starting to see that's going to start to guide the design concept process. And then we're continuing to do community engagement and working with different committees within the city and other organizations within the community to really understand what people's needs and wants are in our downtown core.
Great. Thanks, Tess. And like Tess said, the trends we're going to go through, they're sort of distilled from all of those different venues. So from the workshops, from the early visioning, and from the survey that's been online. So the first one is the community vision. The city council established a vision and the principles you see on the screen. And we asked, in the survey if people support that, and the key takeaways there, yes, all of those principles were supported in the responses from the public and the community. Moving into more, concrete trends that we've clearly heard, the first one and most prominent one is this: keep State Street closed to cars. In the survey responses, 79% of survey responses selected no cars on State Street. You can see the little graphic there. The other options, slow shared street or additional car parking. So a strong preference to keeping State Street closed to cars. In more detail, we asked in actually 4 questions how people want to, in the future, move around in and around State Street. And we asked, how do you want to move around, walking and rolling or bike and scooter, vehicles and transit, and different options. And you can see the responses there. There's some pretty clear trends for walking and rolling, pedestrian only, strong response, bike and scooter, dedicated bike and scooter paths. Vehicles, you can see what I mentioned before, 79% closed. And then a strong preference in the survey responses about keeping transit parallel to State Street. We also asked people in 3 categories again, what activities do they want to see in a future State Street? The first one is gathering activities, and you can see a clear trend towards art and performance spaces, parks and open space, benches and seating, all above 70%. And then the yellow dots we also asked on a map digitally, locate those. Where do you think those kinds of things, your preferred things, should happen? You can see there's a bit of a concentration in the central blocks near Rio Nuevo, but in this case, it's fairly evenly spread through all of the blocks. The second activation question we asked, what kind of passive activities and landscape sort of features and amenities do you want to see? You can see street trees were the strongest response there, as well as stormwater infrastructure. Almost all of them were over 50%, so there's support for all of them. And you can see where those were sort of pretty evenly spread as well. And then the last was street play, and we asked what types of street play would you like to see on the street, and playgrounds were heavily supported, interactive installations again, some passive games. And there you see when we asked where, a bit more concentration on where these things should happen along the whole corridor, with a strong concentration in the 700 and 800 blocks and a couple pockets down at 1200 and 500. From that, another theme that we've heard really consistently, but especially in the design workshop exercises, was to create a flexible flush street. That would sort of maximize the flexibility, remove the curbs and create a flexible flush space.
Can you explain what, sorry, can you
Yeah.
go a little more detail on what a flexible flush street means?
I think at its simplest is remove the curbs so that the space is
All one
more or
level?
less all one level, not perfectly flat because it's got a drain, but basically flat across the whole space.
And the flexibility is just in terms of its use, it's not, you're not talking about the surface construction, you're not.
No, yeah, surface construction, everything would be accessible, and meet all those. Flexibility is really related to amenities and programming, what
Got
kind
it.
of
Okay.
activities could
Yep.
happen on there.
Thank you.
So our, oh, do you want to, I can just, so next steps that we're about to, move into, we're summarizing all of that community input. We've got a lot of those drawings. We're sort of into those themes like we just went through. We've got an SSAC meeting coming up in February, and then the next community meeting window in April, possibly early May. So what we're really moving on to now is the design framework alternatives. So taking what we've learned, start to study alternatives for where people walk, where shuttle go, where bike goes, all of those different sort of what we call frameworks.
Could I butt in with one question? You're talking about stormwater management, which is definitely needed.
Right.
But to me, that means you're going to have to dig up the whole street and put in new storm sewers and inlets, right? You need a lot of construction to somehow get rid of the water flowing down the street.
So that's a possible solution, and we need to get into more detail. We don't know exactly what the volume and all the different technical sides, but you do know from the central 3 blocks or 4 blocks right at Greenwood, there's no inlets there, so we got surface drainage for 4 blocks going down towards the beach. So there's, it's possible that is one of the requirements.
And so we want to spend most of the time now having a discussion with all of you and having an open conversation for individually how you experience streets and what you hope the space includes in the future and what you hope we consider in the design concept, and then also collectively as the full committee. And so up on the slide are a few questions. I'll read them out as well. And so the way we've done this with a couple groups before, we had a joint meeting with the Downtown Parking Committee and Transportation Circulation Committee very recently on this, and then with the Planning Commission and Historic Landmarks Commission. The way that I found it worked pretty well is that people would take 1 or 2 of these questions and respond and go sort of however you like, popcorn your way through, or each person take a turn and then all talk about it collectively. But however the committee would like to go about this. So the questions are, how do you experience streets? What kinds of elements and features do you find most effective on a street? What's working or not working on State Street and in the downtown area? What are your hopes for the future? And what is one thing you would like to accomplish during the Create State Master Plan process?
If I may, Michael Rassler, thank you for your work. Both the city, the consultants, you guys have really done great at this point. I'm really impressed with what I read and saw. I have I guess a bigger and a priori question before we get into these. If we're talking 20 to 30 years from now, I think there are a couple of fundamental questions, issues, that need to be thought about, and perhaps they have, and I'm just not seeing them here. But for example, if we look 20 to 30 years from now and how State Street's going to function, I think we need to understand how will transportation, quote, work 30 years from now. Will it be all electric, all solar, all wind turbine generated? And then if so, where are all those charging stations? Where are the moving walkways, whether they're covered like they have in Vegas or not, like in airports? More or less bicycles and scooters. I don't know what's really going to happen. And so if there are many, many more scooters and bikes, then we need parking stalls, we need stations. And for many of them being electric, the charging. What about above ground walkways? So that at ground level are all the activities and park and recreational and engagement in food and shopping and whatever, but why not have the walkways that are moving people up and down State Street above ground? We've all seen the Jetsons. We're talking 30 years from now. We got to be thinking the future. Like you say, not now. In the future. And those are all defined as like slow-moving conveyor mechanisms that transport people horizontally or over an inclined plane over a short to medium distance. So up and down, and we know parts of State Street have a slight incline. So for people that we work with, in terms of the disabled community, people living with disabilities, whether physical, mental, emotional, cognitive, or otherwise, being able to move is often a big issue. And if you do not have an electric wheelchair and you do not have somebody who is propelling you, how are you getting from point A to point B? We can take care of that for them. Yeah. Another key question in addition to transportation for me is communication. How are people going to communicate 30 years from now? Are there going to be touch screens and kiosks with virtual reality and 3D projections of who you're talking to? You know, like we've seen, I think, Star Wars, and they hold up the thing, and Emperor Palpatine pops up, and, you know, you're looking at him, talking, interfacing with him. Are we going to have that 30 years from now? So when I want to, maybe she'll be there, I want to talk to my grandmother and, you know, or my mother even in Florida, instead of just a phone call or FaceTiming, you know, is it going to be different? And if so, where are those stations going to be? You know, so for whatever, you know, interactive touchscreens, also for information or educational kiosks. You know, so somebody comes to Santa Barbara and they want to know the history of a specific place, you know, or a specific space. And it's now different 30 years ago from what it is today or what it was 100 years ago. Or on that touch screen, you know, where to go for food, shopping, sightseeing, wines, fishing, water sports, hikes, bikes, so all of the informational stuff that a local or anybody coming to Santa Barbara is going to want. You know, we have an information center, you know, down on Cabrillo. I don't know how many people actually go in there and check out the maps and the things that they have. It's actually pretty cool. But those should be all over. Everybody should have instant access to all of that. You know, like museums have, you know, for various displays or exhibits. The next question, I didn't make so many notes on it, you know, is really, how are people going to live 30 years from now? You know, are people going to have homes, literally like many of us do today? Multiple, you know, literally everybody gets their own room? You know, or are we going to be living differently? Are we going to be living vertically? You know, and what's going to happen to our 40-foot or 60-foot, depending on how you listen to, you know, rule in terms of height? You know, until we're, I don't think we have to answer all those, but those types of questions and issues, I think, are part of the calculus of figuring out that solution or that answer going forward.
Good thoughts.
I'd like to say something. I want to focus a little bit on the access for the disabled. And one of the things I want to ask is if there's going to be
Microphone,
a
please.
CAS person reviewing the plan. Do you have a CAS certified person on yours?
I was actually just emailing people on our staff to make sure. We do have a dedicated, I think our Berkeley, one of our California offices, ADA specialty team.
Yeah.
I will be honest, I don't know if they are certified, so we'll find out and make sure. Yep.
Because we have a number of local ones.
Okay.
And this is always an issue with parking and heights and accessibility that an actual certified architect.
Yeah.
Karen needs to turn on her mic if she wants to be heard.
Okay, could you
I
hear
heard
me on that one? Sarita, you want me to repeat?
Yes, please, thank you.
Okay, I'm hoping that a CAS person, either locally or from the consulting company, can review the plan for accessibility with regards to heights and surfaces and such.
Can I ask if there's unanimous agreement on that here from the committee?
Yes, you can ask, and I think we'll have a quick roll
Okay.
call vote.
Okay.
I should put it this way, anyone think we should not have a CASP on this project? Okay, it's unanimous that we definitely want to have a CASP person review the final projects and to be involved in the,
And possibly if you have a CAS, that they also consult with our local CAS person who
Yeah.
knows things. Also surface ground, are you going to make recommendations for the type of surfaces?
We will. So our design goes to a fairly conceptual level, so we'll talk about types of surfaces. We're not going to construction documents, but we'll definitely, you know, there are lots of good guidance about the different types of surfaces, whether it's, you know, a unit paver and the joint heights and the joint width and all of that. So we're well versed in that, but so we will talk about that in any, you know, any pavement surface that we suggest or any, you know, options we recommend. We'll definitely make sure we address how they make sure this place remains accessible to all.
Okay, and were you involved in the Denver, is it the Laramie project?
There's the 16th Street Mall, which is the shared street. It's really a pedestrian mall that was built in 1983 and is being rebuilt now. So I've been involved in that for the last 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where all the lights are hanging outside and the restaurants and the
Larimer,
boutiques?
Larimer Square is a street that's perpendicular to the mall, and it's about a block. And that's where the lights are hanging over it. And I know it well. I used to live around the corner from it. I haven't honestly said it can be designed, directly involved in any of the design, but I do know it well.
Yeah, that was a very inviting area.
Yeah.
For tourists and I'm sure locals. Lots of small boutiques and nice little gourmet restaurants.
I would say it's one of the spots in Denver that is most similar to State Street in the scale, the historic architecture, the width, and the sort of human grain fabric of the retail. Interestingly, they've also closed that over the last 3 years to cars and are talking about how to make that permanent as well.
Okay, and how long of a distance does that span?
So Larimer Square is 1 block,
1 block?
so it's
Okay.
400 feet. Yeah, so quite a bit shorter.
Do you think the length of State Street and what we're trying to do is unrealistic to get people back to the full area? Because I know, having been mobility impaired for the last 6 months with sprained ankle and knee injury, that I only want to walk a block or two max.
Right.
Okay? And I'm sure people pushing wheelchairs and all the work on their shoulders, they're not going to traverse whatever 10 blocks or 14 blocks. So I'm wondering if there's a design element that sort of keeps restaurants in one place and art in one place, or is it going to be interdispersed between the 14 blocks? So, access is a problem when you want to go, let's say, I want to shop at this store, but I want to go to that restaurant.
Absolutely. You bring up some really interesting points that we'll be getting into as we move forward. First, your first question, is it too long to be successful? I don't think so, but it does have the length creates some challenges that we need to think about. We mentioned Larimer Square, 16th Street Mall is 12 blocks, so it's almost like the identical length to State Street. And it's, like you said, if you're on one end of the mall and you want to go to the restaurant on the other end, for anybody, that's a long way to go, right? Especially if you're going uphill. So how do we make sure that that is connected and can be an experience? And also, we determined early on that it's too long to be one thing, right? So
Okay.
we need to talk about how we use districts, character areas, diversify that whole place so that it sort of can be experienced maybe as 3 different places that are connected. So all
Okay.
of those are good points and things to
I
work through.
really liked Michael's idea about people mover. And what it brought to mind is those people movers in the airport. So you've got pedestrians, wide pedestrian areas on both sides, but if you can't walk or got something heavy or whatever, you're carrying a baby, you can get on the people movers. So that might be an idea that could be somehow brought into the plan, at least in a small area, in the most
think-
used area. A few more things. Is your plan going to allow the cross-traffic still that's going on now? Because I think that's an obstacle to feeling free to stroll.
Right. I would expect that, many of the streets that cross it will still cross it. We're looking at 3 blocks, but one of the options on the table that could be is, are there other perpendicular streets that we want to do things with? In any case, I would say, how do we mark those intersections, shorten the crossing distance, work with, long-term signals, all of the elements that make that a comfortable, safe crossing, so that doesn't, we talk about State Street as a thing, but really, if it's a challenge to cross every intersection, it's 12 individual, that experience is a significant part of the experience of the whole corridor. So we need to make sure that works for everybody as well.
Right. And regarding the outdoor restaurant dining spaces, now I recall from Laramie Street that they had sort of movable wooden fencing type things, so that if they had to move them out of the way, they could just abut them closer to the store opening. The parklet thing is a real obstacle to strolling down State Street, and then there's this big wooden structure that you can't enter from State. And if you're mobility impaired, you have to walk to the next street and get on the curb and then walk back, which could be several thousand feet of distance just because you can't enter it from this way. So I'm hoping this whole parklet box thing disappears and we just have outdoor seating with maybe some fencing around with entrances from the actual pedestrian area.
Can we, as a group, have a discussion about that? Would this be a good time to do that, or you want to wait until everybody's had their individual moment?
Just want to chime, before you do have that discussion, I do want to just chime in and emphasize that this plan will not look like what State Street looks like today. So you see outdoor dining and parklet configurations today, and those are temporary in nature. Those were never intended to be permanent structures, and we fully recognize that. The long-term plan will have outdoor dining in some capacity included, but likely more in line with what, one of the things we talked about was that flexible flush street. So really thinking about how can outdoor seating, whether that be dining or a public space, but how can that feel like one space rather than individual locations. So just wanted to highlight that.
Did you have more?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Now, when I travel to somewhere like Mexico, they have a plaza where sometimes they set up a stage and the seating and all that. Is that part of the design and entertainment element that's going to possibly be in this plan, so that if we want to have a entertainment, dancing, instead of the parades that just stroll, we can sit and watch like they do in other countries.
Absolutely. And that's part of what we, when we say flexible or adaptable, right? That you can have a space that can be used in one way every day, and then we want to have an event or dance or something like that, or music on that space, we've got the space to accommodate that. The challenge and the big trade-off coming will be, we've got 80 some feet of right-of-way width in state, is accommodating all of the different things we want to accommodate and do it in a way that we can have enough space for that as well.
Okay. When do you expect to submit the proposal?
So we will be back to the community, in sort of mid-April-ish, we'll say April, with alternatives
Okay.
for you all to review. So we're not going straight from here to here's what we think the design looks like. It's
Okay.
going to be, here's a few different alternatives for how many blocks are closed, how to shuttles or all kinds of different options for how we move people in and around the district and how that relates to creating that kind of space for a dance, for a band, right? So we'll be back with 3 alternatives because there's some important choices and trade-offs for the community to discuss. We'll be back with that in the spring, in April, and then after we survey and do, have a bunch of conversations, we'll be back later in the summer with a preferred alternative.
Okay. And you had mentioned a dedicated bike path. Can you define what you mean by dedicated bike path in your idea right now?
So one of the categories and the responses from the community in the surveys was, I'd like to see bikes in a dedicated path. And that got, less sort of preference than some other options. I would think of it, there's a lot of different ways to think about how you define a bike lane. But dedicated, protected is another word, with some sort of permanent physical barrier that separates it from pedestrians or people that are playing in a playground or watching music, right? So something that really creates that separation is what I envision as dedicated.
Right. I am one of those pedestrian-only advocates. We have a park in town, Shoreline Park, which is supposed to be pedestrian-only, and there's about 15 or 20 signs. And people on electric bikes and just bikes and crowds of bikes are going through there, while people in wheelchairs and walkers and strollers and dogs on leashes. And it's just a catastrophe waiting to happen. I just don't think speed and people mix in that way. I mean, even people pushing strollers or in wheelchairs, sometimes it's hard to navigate. But when you've got someone going fast, it's a liability.
The scooters, and in particular the e-bikes, are a new dynamic in the street, right? They're different than a bike was before, that, because of just what you said, speed. So that's something
Yeah,
we need to
we
figure out.
don't want to incur more disabled because of
Right.
that. So I don't have a problem with people walking their bikes,
Mm-hmm.
bringing their bikes, but riding their bikes. There's too many people that don't comply with the law these days. There's this attitude of I can do what I want. You can't tell me what to do. So I really hope that we can have State Street be accessible and pedestrian only, so we can all be happy. And the bikes can go anywhere else around it. That's it. So you wanted to have another discussion, Nick?
Yeah, I just want to, I think that to the extent that we have subjects that we all agree on, I think that's helpful to give staff and the consultants here that unanimous feedback. What was it? It was the parklet barriers that you brought up that, just by way of a little bit of history that the State Street staff and the consultants may not be aware of, but the parklet program has been around for almost 3 years now, and it's been completely inaccessible the entire time. And this committee has fought for 3 years to get our accessibility, and today we have 70-something parklets that have been inspected, and over 50 of them are inaccessible, and that's completely unacceptable. And so there's a little bit of frustration from this committee about these things get planned and we're not considered stakeholders. And so we hear about these stakeholder events, the outreach, and yes, the public ones we have an opportunity to engage in, but I think that I certainly didn't go because I didn't want to be amongst the hundreds or thousands of other people who wouldn't be heard in all of this. Everybody's asking for what they would like in an ideal world where this is what is required by state and federal law, and the city has this resource, which is this committee, which you can consult as stakeholders anytime. And so I would encourage you to do so often. Because I would really hate to see us get like across the finish line and 3 years later still be inaccessible. Apologize, my screen timed out and I need to get my notes back up. But can I ask the committee, in terms of the parklet barriers, that was one part of the parklet program that we've objected to all along, and I think we're in agreement that there should be no barriers to these parklets. I think that, even when there is an opening both from the street and from the sidewalk, it's very limiting to accessibility. It means that a wheelchair user can only have access to the tables that are immediately adjacent to that opening, whereas there may be, a lot of perimeter seating that's inaccessible because of a perimeter barrier. And the restaurants may do their required 5% accessible seating, but that's occupied. It doesn't have to be reserved for somebody in a wheelchair. So I show up, the 5% of seating is being used by someone else that's not in a wheelchair. There's a perfectly good vacant table around the perimeter, but I can't get to it. And so these perimeters are very, very limiting, and I wonder if there's a consensus on that.
Unfortunately, not for me.
Okay.
I think the perimeters actually are important for a variety of reasons. That's where you attach any wind screen or wind breakage, so that you're not freezing and cold. I don't think the issue is as much the perimeter being the barrier. I think it's accessibility and having the tables far enough apart so that wheelchairs can get to those tables along the perimeter. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree. That table that's open, that is along the perimeter of whatever space the restaurant has, you should be able to get to that.
Right.
If you can't get to it, the problem is the tables are too close. The problem is not that the building or the parklet is contained.
Yeah.
Inside a regular restaurant, there are tables along the wall, but you can get to it because there's enough room between the tables that you can
Not always.
navigate. Not always, I understand,
and
but
this-
that's the design. You should be able to navigate
Right.
it and get to there.
But the city doesn't want to enforce that, and that leaves those of us in wheelchairs with only one option, which is civil litigation.
My name is Suzanne Tejada. I'm just going to interject. I'm a member of the Access Advisory Committee. I'm also a member of the State Street Advisory Committee, and so I've been involved in a lot of these conversations with the master planning. And I hear you loud and clear, Nick, about the current parklet situation. And that is a separate situation from the future visioning
Yeah.
of what we are talking about today. So I don't want to distract from what you're saying, but I want to change the direct focus to the future planning and what we can do to make the situations better than dealing with what's not working right now, because that's not going to be there.
Okay.
Anyway.
And my only reason for mentioning the current situation is to avoid that kind of thing developing. Right.
Yes. And the response to whether there's a CASP certified person on it or not, the law, I know we've been dealing with this a lot, that we have existing conditions that are not compliant with ADA laws, and we're dealing with fixing a lot of things constantly. I'm an architect, and I understand, when you get new permits for things, you have to comply with the law. So, it's sort of understood that any new development will comply with the laws, in my experience.
And while I appreciate that is the intent of the law, in practice, we see that's not always the case, right?
If I may, I do want to, first of all, agree with Nick, in terms of involving and engaging, this committee or others. If I come down to your last question here, what's the one thing you would like to accomplish during the Create State process? And I note that the question is not to create, the finished product. It's about the process. And in that regard, I would think that our committee would be of consensus and a like mind that the one thing we would like to accomplish during the Create State process is to include and incorporate access in the broadest and fullest sense in the process. That could be this committee or any variety, and Nick has volunteered us. I think we would all agree, anything we can do to help, we want to be involved above and beyond Susan, being the liaison and engaged with that. But I would point out that being involved in the process does not ensure that our issues, our thoughts, our recommendations are going to be included in the final product. And those are two different things. The process, which it's critical that access in the fullest extent, Access Advisory Committee, be engaged, be involved. But I think it's important for us on the committee to really understand and appreciate that there's a difference between the process, and there are other players, there are other voices, there are other issues competing for a lot of the same stuff. And there's no guarantee that just because you're part of the process that you're also going to be part of whatever the final product is. But I believe we have to do our best to bring to the table, to bring to the process those issues and those concerns which affect the community that we are either personally or professionally involved and engaged in, working with, supporting, or living. So that's, as far as what I'd like to accomplish, I just think it's critical that the process is managed correctly.
I would agree.
I agree with all those statements, and thank you all for your comments. I have one thing I want to back up what Nick said. I talked to the downtown group just last week, and I was told there's still 51 parklets that are not compliant yet. It's almost 3 years, and Nick said this group has been doing this since March of 2020. We wrote to City Council, to City Administrator, to the Public Works, please make it accessible. And now, 3 years later, there's still 51 parklets that the city itself says aren't yet accessible. This is a terrible thing that we're allowing. And I just want to make sure that that number is out there, because that is, to me, very telling on how we're marginalized as a group, and no one at the city seems to really be serious about fixing this. I've been told by Downtown Parking that they have no enforcement capabilities. Well, who does then? I don't understand that statement. Well, it's not my job. I don't want to get into that, but anyway, there's 51 that still aren't accessible after 3 years.
Once
Okay.
again, we have the wonderful opportunity to have MIG here and Tess here, and this is not what they're tasked to deal with, the existing parklets, and I really want to, I mean, tell me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I would love to hear more from you and to engage with you about the future planning.
And can
I
I,
think-
sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Suzanne. And that's right. I think it is important to lift up. I recognize that there are issues today. I think, honestly, we all do recognize that. I know that the Public Works team is trying to work on that, but I do want to spend the time here talking about the master plan process, and we want to engage with you. That's why I'm here. It's the third meeting that we've had with committee or commissions in the city, so it's still early in our process in terms of engaging committees and commissions within the city, and we take it seriously. I mean, we do want to have a future plan where access is of utmost importance. I mean, I think that I speak for the entire team, MIG and the city, that is a very important part. I think what would help us is, as you are experiencing downtowns either here or elsewhere, what are things that you find are effective when you walk down a street? There are different ways to experience a street, and what helps you either move around, or the signage or informational booths, kiosks. I think that's a great idea was mentioned. That's something that's really helpful for us to take into consideration. But better understanding sort of how we can get into the mindset of experiencing streets, and what you find to be effective on a street would really help the team, I think, in terms of design.
Can we go back to the flush flexible opinion or idea? I think that's critical, and I want to know if we have consensus on that.
I think we do. Does anyone disagree that we want the flush street? Okay, we're in consensus there. I want to mention something that's proactive here. When you look at the European model, there's hardly any barriers at all. And if we have a flush street, there's no reason to have any kind of platform or any kind of fencing around it, or minimal fencing at least. I think if we make sure that these dining areas are just on the street with tables and chairs, with enough room for mobility through them, that we can solve a lot of the problems that we've had, because the parklets we have now were never designed and inspected by CASP, so they're not accessible. So if we can, I think we all agree that we need to have just tables and chairs on the street or on the sidewalk with not a lot of barriers to them.
Yeah, that I've heard. It's been the conversation about parklets. Actually, I wrote a couple notes here because two things. In the plan we could start to develop. What is the right size? Make sure that there's standards for if you have two different types of table arrangement. The width and the space for a patio. I'm gonna stop calling it a parklet because in the future it'll just be patio seating, right? Mm-hmm. For a restaurant, what is that right width, so that we make sure restaurants understand the maximum amount of space they have and the rules for filling that space. So, because we don't want to fill the entire width with restaurant. Also, second, a lot of cities, Denver included, they require a railing sort of to define, and some restaurants want that, to define this is our patio, this is not public. But the issue that you brought up about that railing creates access challenges, you know, I learned something. I'll be perfectly honest, that had not been brought up before in any meeting I've had, but it's a great point. So how do we make that railing, if there is a railing, or can we create policies where that's not required or not allowed, or if there is, it's movable quickly so we don't, you know, so we can address that question. You can access seats from all the directions. I think that's a great point, and those are the kinds of things that we can take and embed into a plan.
Great.
Same thing, sorry, and to the kind of stuff that would be great to hear. As Suzanne said, everything we do will meet ADA requirements, of course. You know, that is the law. We will meet that. We understand the details of that. But that's just a requirement. There's a lot of things and elements and details in a public space in a streetscape that aren't covered by ADA. I'll give an example. On the mall in Denver, we've had the similar group out, you know, we walked the mall with them. Now we've got a 20 by 30 foot, you know, sort of test bed of the future design where we're replacing pavers and trying, is this texture, can you feel it? Does it work? Does this work for you? So there's a conversation. One of the things they said early on was what would really be helpful, and this is not, doesn't show up anywhere in ADA, is a continuous pavement joint that runs parallel to the sidewalk. When I hit that with my cane, I can feel it, and I know where I am. That's not in anything. That is guidance that you only get from this conversation. That kind of stuff, it's now in the design. Those kind of things are there. We can make that happen. No one else even notices it's there, but it's really meaningful to that community. So those are the kind of things, as we keep going on this journey, and we'll be back, those are the kind of things we want to hear from you guys, because we make sure beyond ADA, really what are the little features or big features that make this really not just accessible, but welcoming and comfortable for everyone.
That sounds like a good idea down the center, too, not just on the side. I'm an occupational therapist, so I've 43 years working with the disabled. So what I want to do is redefine the definition of what the design group thinks of disabled, okay? So as an occupational therapist, reaching heights can be a disability, okay? Reaching in to take a parking ticket out of a window if you have a short arm or a stroke or a shoulder surgery. Distance stamina is a disability. Mobility, whether it be when I had a sprain, okay, or a healing fracture, or a stroke, or an amputation, or being in a wheelchair or walker. Those are also disabilities to consider. People with back problems can't walk far. They need to sit. One of the problems I see on State Street, along with a lot of the mom and pop stores left, and now the big box stores left, is they took out all the seating because the homeless were using them. I don't want to walk so far. I have back problems, neck problems, mobility problems. I can't access what I want to access on State Street because there's no chairs to sit down and rest like I can rest at Shoreline Park or a lot of the park. So I'm hoping that somehow we accommodate a lot of sitting and also sculptures. So we can have sculptures with a cement rail around them so people can sit down there. We can have fountains and just, different mechanism to sit down. It doesn't have to be benches or chairs, okay? It can be cement or whatever, piece of wood, sculptural wood, art. I really would like to see more art and music and entertainment, things that draw not just me, but everybody. I
think there's a lot of call for that already.
That's consistently heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good.
But you do mention something in passing, in terms of the what's not working question. And clearly, with all of the vacant storefronts, retail emptiness, and I don't know if that's really a landlord-tenant relationship thing, but the cost per square foot, it doesn't bear out. It just doesn't pencil out for the store owners. It works fine for the landlords, well, if they can get somebody in there, or it's the loss leader on their, their taxes, because, it works both ways for them. But for the actual business, something isn't working. And I don't know that it ever will, the way, everything is structured today. Hopefully in 30 years, all that space has something in it that is vibrant and is a draw, and whether that's arts and whether that's music and whether that's, different pop-up, opportunities and business retail is just being done differently. And we don't even have to know today what that's going to be, and there's no way to know. Otherwise, we'd all be, investing in that right now. But that's not working right now, and that has to change going forward, because
I don't see how this.
I don't know how we do
Right.
anything with
I mean,
it.
I
But
think you hit the nail
dealing
on
with
the
their
head.
questions.
It's in short of a tax code change to make it so that there aren't, the opportunities to take these losses on your taxes. That's the only thing keeping supply and demand for bringing the rents down, and there's nothing this committee or this focus group can do about it.
I'm just addressing what's not working, and what's not working on State Street, is retail. Small retail. It's just not working, and maybe it just doesn't belong there. Maybe it's no longer a part of the vision, and we forget about that being an economic hub for Santa Barbara. And it's more in Goleta where the tech stuff is going, and it's more, in Carpinteria where the other tech hub seems to be evolving. And it's just not State Street. And it's, it becomes more of a restaurant entertainment zone, than a commercial hub.
Can I ask, has there been any discussion about common area dining? So more
Food
like a
court style.
food court style experience. I know that when I take my family of 4 out to eat, there's a constant fight, 4 different places that we want to go. And, we can always usually find something we all like within a couple blocks there on State Street. It would be real great if we could, have a community, instead of, like right now, what you have with the parklets, I hate to bring that up again, but it's like a land grab. Every restaurant wants to stake their claim, and, there's room for everybody, and we could all commingle, and, it'd be great if, and I'm sure this has already been a discussion, but, and I know it's going to be a challenge, but how we're thinking about dealing with alcohol on the street, in these shared spaces. I know that the law kind of requires each individual restaurant to police their own space in that regard, and I don't know, that's not the case in, say, Las Vegas, so maybe we need a municipal code or something, so.
And,
Committee.
oh, go ahead.
Committee member, it's a great point. I really like the idea of having a space, like a communal dining space or area. We have, part of the team is really looking at the economics of our downtown, and then also looking at case studies in other communities, both in California and then across the country, to try to understand what cities have done. Some of those cities have pedestrian closures, some don't, but have changed the area to be more pedestrian friendly. But one of them that was looked at was San Luis Obispo, actually, and they, during COVID, have a program called Dine Out, where they've created this plaza where you can do pretty much just similar to what you're saying. You grab food to go from restaurants, and then there's an entire seating area for people to sit together, and you can get food in different places. So that's an idea that I think we can definitely think about in the design.
And then the last area of concern to me that I have notes on, something more may come up, but I'm wondering, is parking part of the scope of your focus? Because if it is, I have feedback there.
I would be happy to take the feedback. We have done some initial analyses on parking and the parking structures and what the actual when the peak times are, and which parking structures are more used or less used. And from that information, there's a few lots that are a bit underutilized and that probably could be thought, could be good considerations for redevelopment or thinking about different opportunities. But there are structures, primarily I believe it's around 50 to 60% when you average out the use of parking structures and how frequently they're at capacity, about 50 to 60%. Now that varies. Obviously, if you have a big event, oftentimes the Granada Theater, the lot right there is pretty full. Or if you have events elsewhere, that can change. Weekends are different than weekdays, and so we do see certainly a higher higher usage at different times of the week as well.
Okay. For me, I can't speak for everyone, but the downtown parking structures, the parking garages, the off-street parking is completely inaccessible. I cannot use the kiosks at the waterfront, for example. The city has assured, downtown parking specifically has assured this committee that it is all ADA compliant, and I can tell you it's not. There's reach and vision issues in all of it. And we've recently got an increase in on-street accessible parking, which,
Thanks to Nick.
well, can't take all the credit. We had some help from our friends on staff, but certainly probably it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for members of this committee advocating for it. And today, it's even the designated on-street parking is not ADA compliant. I mean, I'm happy to have the blue curb. It works for me, but it doesn't have all the required ramps and loading aisle and signage and all the details that would make it fully accessible. And I'm very glad to have those 6 new parking spaces adjacent to State Street. But I think we've seen, and you can tell, the traffic safety group will tell you that those new spaces are being utilized. And the double-edged sword for me is I fought to get these spaces, and now they're all full up every time I want to use one. So we need more.
Can I piggyback on
Yeah.
this topic? Yes, I am a frequent user of those new spaces. I love it.
It's your fault.
And so yes, I would prefer to park there than in a lot. But I wanted to circle back to Tess's question about moving and using State Street. I use a wheelchair if I'm down at State Street. If I go to the Granada for a performance or to the Arlington, or even if I go to a restaurant, my husband drives me to the location to drop me off so I don't have to go as far, and then he'll park the car. I'm fortunate I have somebody that can do that for me. So what I've been noticing now with the street closures, I don't have that option to go to the Granada and have a drop off or to do that. And that's a little it makes it a little difficult. They have valet and this and that, but then I have to go to the corner and then anyway. But to get back to the whole master plan idea and your comment about the crossing State Street, those are vital for drop off, actually. Because that's what I use now to drop off, to get to
Right.
different parts of State Street. Therefore, the shuttle, or what I'm hoping there'll be some kind of a shuttle or some kind of form of public transit that can decrease the length of the street where you can get on and get off at certain target areas. So that whole idea of the drop-off and the place to park on those intersections at a handicap spot is very, very helpful.
Yeah, and along that line, this committee has a lot of history with the downtown parking group and accessible loading zones. We see this change in use that should require ADA accessibility happen all the time. Hotels, restaurants, they get a new loading zone, it's not accessible. And, we hear it's technically infeasible, the streets are too narrow, there's not enough room. But maybe what needs to happen is some of these side streets need to be made one way so that you have increased capacity for
A drop-off.
the drop-offs, the, loading zones, the whatever.
Thank you. I think to summarize, we would like the group to really concentrate on disabled parking near State Street and make sure that we have some good areas for people to park
And load?
and load. One of the questions was to explain how you use streets, so I'm going to butt in and tell a few stories here. I moved here in 98 or 95 as a legally blind person who doesn't drive. I moved downtown. I could walk to everything. I could walk 2 blocks and get the shuttle. I could get to the Amtrak station. I could get to Stearns Wharf. I could get to the zoo. I could get to the harbor without having to walk very much. I used to be in urban planning. I understand that people need to see a preview, the new people, the visitors, need to see a preview of what's on State Street. I doubt that many people with families or older people are going to get a hotel on the beach and then walk 1.5 miles up State Street just to see what's there for tonight's activities. The shuttle was always great for that. All my visitors that come out here, we take the shuttle first. I'd say, here's what's available before the shuttle, and we could drive there. I always took my friends up and down in the car to see what's there. Right now, there's no way for anyone to get to the Amtrak station, which I think is the only town I know of that doesn't have any transit to an Amtrak station. And there's no way for most people who live downtown to get to the beach areas easily. And yet the city always talks about we want to have more housing downtown, which I approve of, and with no parking requirements because they thought people could live here without a car. But then they take away the shuttle, and it's been like 3 years now. So I, like many other people, can't get down easily to the beach or anything on the waterfront. And I'm sure that the visitors can't get up to State Street, like all the way to Granada from the beach, just to see what's there. So it's nice that you're talking about having shuttle on the perimeter streets, but I still think the best thing is to have some kind of a shuttle or a people mover on State Street. Because if you go up to Chapala or Anacapa, there's not much to see on what's really over there on State. And people need to have that preview of knowing what's there. So I hope we can get the shuttle problem fixed.
Can I add on to your shuttle discussion? And I'm not sure that this is the right forum, but in the case that there is any ability for the State Street Master Plan to give feedback or help solve this problem, there needs to be a connection between our train line and our bus line. There's a break there, and for people who don't have their own transportation, you get off the train in Santa Barbara and you're stuck. You're walking, you're taking a cab, you're Ubering. There's no way to get to a city bus to connect to airport or anything else.
Very true. I was going to say that I've noticed, I used to be at UCSB, and I noticed that break time, all sorts of students would take the bus in from school, get off at the bus terminal, walk a block, and then hit on the shuttle and get down to the Amtrak. Now you have to walk about 1 mile from the bus station to the Amtrak station with your luggage.
Yep.
This is not good.
So if there's any shuttle discussion related to State Street, it needs to connect to the train station, in my opinion. And maybe we have consensus on that?
Anyone opposed to consensus on that? Okay, we have consensus.
That's all I had on that. Go ahead.
Right now, it's a 1 block walk from the bus station to the State Street shuttle, but we don't have that now.
The
There's no way.
bus station or train station?
From the bus station to State Street to get the shuttle, to get
Yeah,
down
it's
to
1 block,
Amtrak.
yeah.
1 block,
Yeah,
which is doable.
right. And the shuttle routes that I've seen would go 1 block off State Street and connect directly.
Right.
And so I just would, any State Street shuttle, we should make an effort to tie it into Amtrak because, a lot of our visitors are coming in on Amtrak.
Well, I think whether it's on the perimeter streets or on State, it does go to Amtrak.
Oh, it does.
Right,
But you said we no longer have the shuttle.
right.
There's discussions though, right? Yeah, and so.
Matt, you
Yeah.
you are familiar with the Denver, you worked on the Denver Promenade,
14th Street?
yeah.
16th Street, yeah.
Isn't the 16th Street, isn't there a shuttle on that street?
There's
that
a-
runs
there's a-
down the middle?
There's a free shuttle. 16th is sort of anchored on either end now, with the Union Station transit center, which is where all the light rail and the train to the airport all come in. You can hop on a free shuttle and take it to the other end, Civic Center, and there's another transit
Okay.
hub down there. So it's sort of integrated as part of, of the overall transit network in much the way you guys are talking about. And I would say online, and I always get the MTD, just get it back. They've got a proposed new, as they reconstitute the shuttle route, connecting from the train station, the beach, as you said, parallel streets. So they've, I think it's out there for public comment or whatever. It is just on their website, a proposed new shuttle route.
Thank you. I was going to mention the 16th Street shuttle because I've been in there before. I could come in from the airport at Denver, take the light rail to downtown, hop on the free bus and go over to the Amtrak station and take a train ride out to Salt Lake City or something. Here, I can't do that. So I really think that we need to get the shuttle going as soon as possible, but I know that's not your job. But I would like to see the shuttle on State Street, personally.
Well, and as we look at alternatives, we were looking at how does the shuttle integrate? Does it integrate on State Street? Does it integrate on parallel streets? What is the impact of that to the other goals like activation, having a band, right? The shuttle on the 16th Street Mall is an integral part of the overall transportation network, but it has a huge impact on the use of the street. And it's one of the primary reasons it's being rebuilt and sort of reconfigured. So there are trade-offs, and that's what we're going to be studying to all of this.
Right. And as I mentioned before, I think if visitors here can actually take a shuttle up and down State Street, then they know where they want to go tonight. Without that, they're not going to even know there's a State Street out there, because it's
That's why you need those kiosks. Your first question, how do you experience streets, is really interesting. I've been thinking about that in terms of, and I think I experience streets pretty much in two ways. I go to a particular place and I need the street to get there. And so it's a tool, and really no more than that. And I'm going to one store, one shop, one friend's house, whatever, and I'm coming home. So it's how I get back and forth. The other way I experience streets is, the incredible stimulation. And there are streets that you're on to enjoy what's going on around you, not to get anywhere in particular. And you'll see stuff along your way that you'll stop in and maybe shop or not, or you'll walk past, or you'll come back and visit later. But it's information intake and observation, and just the notion of so much stimulation, all the stimuli. And so what I read in the report in terms of, in what you spoke as well, some of the music, right? Different venues for live art, performing art. Places where periodically, whether it's a speaker or a public activity or one of our many organizations or nonprofits, is doing something with whoever their community is, or fundraising, or whatever it might be. But a street, to me, it's either you're there enjoying the street and everything that it brings, whether it's in Amsterdam or in Rome, or and think of any of the great venues. You're not using the street to get anywhere. You're there for the street. That's what it's all about. So if State Street, stops being the transportation route where you're getting from, whether it's Stearns, Stearns Wharf to, Montecito Bank and Trust on, was it Victoria? You don't need State Street for that. You can, again, Chapala,
Only to get under the freeway.
Under, around, over, again, those walkways, those conveyors can go up, they can go under, they can go anywhere. But yes, obviously, you got to deal with certain elements, but we're also looking 30 years from now. They're taking our left-hand turn, off of the 101. I think it's the last left-hand exit in the state, off of the main freeway, and we're going to lose that. And I think, because I love coming down Cabrillo to, and we're going to lose that. So 30 years, it may, State Street, it all may be going under State Street. It all may be going over.
Yeah.
But State Street right now and the 101 right now, neither of them work.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, I see no reason not thinking big, envisioning, and the 101 isn't a barrier to anything 30 years from now. You know, it's a today issue. It's not a tomorrow issue.
All right.
Okay.
Chair Marston, I would like to point out the time.
I was just going to say, it's past 10:50.
I
Can we-
got one more comment.
Could we conclude this?
I would like to think that we might get another opportunity down the road to engage in further discussion. We're definitely here and want to engage in this process.
Very much so.
Yes, Chair and committee members, absolutely. So we're happy to come and present, give you an update. I know that Suzanne has done a great job of providing regular updates with what the State Street Advisory Committee has done, and so she'll continue to do that as well. And then staff and the full team can come and have this larger briefing. Also, I want to highlight just April will be the time frame where we start to release concepts to the public. So I would really encourage all of you to attend those future workshops. I don't have the date yet, but our website, you'll be able to find it on our website. It's statestreet.santabarbaraca.gov. You can subscribe to our newsletter there. We make sure that everyone whose contact information we have gets notified. I can also make sure to let Brian know and have it sent out to the Access Advisory Committee so that you were all aware of that event. And then likely after that public workshop, that'll be really the first unveiling of those designs. So that from that, we'll have the survey open, and then I'll start to have more community engagement efforts and go out to committees. So probably in that late spring, early summer timeframe would be when I would anticipate coming back to your committee for more input and feedback.
Wonderful.
Tess, can I ask you this? Many of us here are on other nonprofit groups that work with disability. Karen works with disabled people. Mike does, Nick and I. Should we talk to the consulting group or to you if we have suggestions about access issues? What's the best place to?
So the best way to get in touch would be to contact me directly.
Okay.
So you can contact me either by phone or email. We also have an email for the State Street Master Plan. It's statestreetmasterplan@santabarbaraca.gov. Or you can use my email. It's tharris@santabarbaraca.gov, and you can contact me directly. That works also.
Thank you so much. Sarita, could you put those two addresses in the minutes and maybe send them out to us today if you can, or tomorrow?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Karen, you had one more?
My last comments before we close up. First of all, 30 years from now, I won't be here. I'll be lucky to be here 20 years.
You mean in Hawaii?
Yeah, it's the Hawaiian heaven. Okay, so 30 years from now, we're going to have an elderly population. We might all be driving electric bikes or electric something, golf carts like Palm Springs. So that has to be, yeah, well, this is it. My next car is a golf cart. Okay, lastly, on a personal note, when I think of an exciting downtown, I think of Santana Street in LA, the Mercado, the outdoor markets, the hubbub, the people, hey, they're squawking, hey, lady, come here. That's part of the excitement, and the food vendors, and having flea markets, not just go in the store and the cash register, interacting like in the old country. I just, one of my favorite places was to go to the vegetable market in Jerusalem, and everybody's hawking and screaming, and hey, tomatoes, and they got baked goods, all these sweets and the vegetables and knickknacks, and that gives it life. Stores don't necessarily give it life. It's people outside making energy and excitement. So hopefully we can incorporate that outdoor element, even if it's little Mexicans selling corn, because I frequent them every day, okay? From the food courts, because it's so good. Where can I get corn in the middle of winter? So So that's my personal comment. The art, the vendors, the flea markets, mercados, sculptures, fountains, sitting places, besides the access.
Okay, I want to thank the group for coming here, Tess and you other guys. Appreciate it very much. And please remember, we're here to help you with the access problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you for
for your
having
time.
us and looking forward to being here again soon.
Great job, really appreciate your.
And
your
by the
time
way, I
and
hear
input.
so many good comments about how your outreach really was very inclusive. You did a lot of work just to get those different meetings with the staff and with the public. I
Thank
heard a lot
you.
of good comments yesterday at City Council.
Well, I certainly invite all of you to join us in April. We've, really tried to make it as inviting as we can and do outreach a little bit differently. So please join us
Yeah,
next
I
time.
would echo Chair Marston's remarks. I had several board members, and, I sent the information out to our board at Hillside, and I had a few board members that I know, because they got in touch with me after and said they went, and they really appreciated both how it was done and the opportunity to be able to represent Hillside and our residents in the process, so thank you.
Chair Marston, so speaking of public and comments, I know nobody's in the room, but Sarita, is there anybody online raising their hand for public
No one
comment?
is online raising their hand.
Okay. Then maybe a short recess before the next item?
That would be great, for me anyway. 5 minutes? Return at 5 after? back to order.
Recording in progress.
And we'll hear from Brian Demore about the ADA transition plan.
All right. Thank you, Chair Marsden and members of the Access Advisory Committee. My name is Brian Demore, City Engineer and ADA Coordinator for the City of Santa Barbara. And today we're going to talk about an item that I know it's been brought up in the past, and I've heard at times from some members of the committee about the ADA transition plan. And just like the item we covered earlier today, I'm really excited to have this opportunity to think, looking forward and make plans for how do we want to continue to move on this item as we go forward, because this is, to me, exactly the kind of item that this committee's created for, to provide advice to staff on, because there are a number of different ways we can go. That's going to be what we see at the end. And I really want to hear from the committee, because I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I would probably pick one given the opportunity to choose, but I'd rather hear from the committee. So that's why I'm here today. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through these slides because I'd rather spend the time giving you the opportunity as a committee to discuss and then hopefully make some kind of a motion that will be helpful. And of course, we can continue this. That's the beauty of this special meeting. We have a regularly scheduled meeting that is around the corner, and we can continue this item. So we don't have to figure it all out today, but I think in these 45 minutes we can make good progress. So just a quick timeline here with enactment of ADA and then the city's original self-evaluation and transition plan. That was all the way back in the early 90s. The plan that we have today that we've been working off of is 2008. And that was done by consultant, Gilda Puente Peters, and it was about a $260,000 effort at that time, 15 years ago, just to give you an idea of magnitude of cost on that. The plan itself has 5 main components. It was an accessible survey, transition plan update, self-evaluation plan, also an accessibility training program, and then it included a preliminary capital improvement report that really went out like 30 years. The capital improvement report that was included went out, as I said, about 30 years, which is a long time, but I think for planning purposes, it was just to give a sense of, at certain funding levels, how long it would take to get certain elements done. I think the main portion of the transition plan that was updated in 2008, the biggest, at least for me from the public works perspective where we do capital projects, the key component of that is the accessibility survey and then the recommended work that came out of that. And just wait a second here. I did bring copies, not because we're going to go through the binders today, but just to show that effort was a huge task for the consultant. And there are actually more than 3 binders because it's overflowing, or more than 3 banker's boxes. There's a lot of material that was put together. As I said, though, for me, it's that accessibility survey and then the capital improvements that are most interesting, and possibly to this committee as well would be the most interesting and important. So the accessibility survey, it did 2 things. It did a detailed survey for 9 what they called priority facilities, priority locations, and then a general evaluation for selected general fund and enterprise facilities. The 9 locations, I think we mentioned this, we talked about it briefly the last committee meeting. They're listed here, I'll read them off, but it was City Hall and the City Hall Annex, Central Library and the East Side Library, Cabrillo Pavilion, 630 Garden Street, which is this building that we're in right now. And I actually did pull out the binder for this location, and it's just pages and pages of items that were called out on when that survey was done. And it's little things and big things, but the whole kind of touching on the whole campus. So there's stuff outside the building, stuff inside the building, and some of it is workspace, staff workspace, in addition to the points that the public interacts with. West Side Community Center, Mackenzie Park, including the Lawn Bowls, Alice Keck Park, Memorial Gardens, and the police station. So those were the 9 that were identified. And just to give you an idea of, again, the magnitude of the effort that went into this, there were 3,438 individual work items identified for those 9 priority locations. Gives you an idea why we have so many binders. And those items were then prioritized as A, B, and C, and built into this 30-year capital plan that was developed as part of the transition plan update. And for the other facilities, as I mentioned, it was more of a general evaluation, but not into the really fine details.
Ryan, in terms of those 3,438 individual work items on the 9 priority locations, do we have any idea how many of them have been completed?
Committee member Kuntz. No, not really. So I think it's on the next slide where I was just going to mention that we have we've done a lot of work in the 15 years, but the items that we had, the product that we got from this update didn't translate into a nice spreadsheet format where we could easily check things off as they were completed. We have this all in kind of clunky PDFs. I did very recently discover that our facilities team, at some point in the last maybe 5 or so years, did, I don't know how they were able to do it, because if they did it on those 3,000 items, that would have been a lot of staff time if it was by hand. But we do have it now into a spreadsheet format where it is somewhat sortable and could become useful, but we're also 15 years out.
Right.
And so that's why we're part of the reason to have the conversation.
So that's my confusion. I appreciate that. So, 'cause I do remember seeing something where there's kind of a checklist of all the stuff that's been done, and then the incredible amount of stuff that's yet to be done. But that's why I understand the 2 answers. That report in 2008, didn't have the assessment in it, but since then, like about 4 or 5 years ago, apparently, somebody took a crack at, of that 30-year report, what's been done and what hasn't been done.
That's correct. So,
Because I had a sense, as I was reading it, and coming to this meeting, well, gee, why don't we just finish or recommend finishing, the priority items, in the order that they were laid out. I don't know that a lot has changed, but perhaps it has.
so
I just remembered seeing it.
Right.
yeah,
Are we going to have call for public comment, or is that after your presentation?
it'll be after
Okay,
the.
let's let you
the
finish your
presentation. Yep.
presentation. All right.
So as I mentioned, we have made progress. We haven't, because we didn't have that spreadsheet at the time, we hadn't been tracking it. So we can't easily give a report like, okay, for this priority location, how many work items were completed, how many are yet to be completed. We simply do not have that. So where do we go from here? We can continue to go forward with this status quo of it's about $350,000 every year has been budgeted for ADA transition plan. It's very generic, and staff identifies projects, does things here and there. It hasn't been well programmed. I think getting more feedback from the committee would be helpful if we were going to continue on that status quo path. But we could also, on the other side of that extreme, would be create 3 more boxes and call it the 2023 transition plan update, and probably actually have on the next slide estimated costs. I don't want to pull that up yet, but that's going to come at significant cost. And I think the caution that I would have going into that is we don't want to just create another monster that's so big that we can't manage it when there is limited funding. Let's try to be very effective with deploying those funds so that as much as possible ends up going to capital improvements. So another option, kind of a level down from a complete update. We could look back at those 9 locations, have a consultant, could even be the same consultant, revisit. We could also have staff do it. I don't know that staff's going to have the time or the expertise to go through, all of those individual items. But we could do that. Would be more of an update, a smaller update to the report. Or we could say, it's been 15 years. We know the Cabrillo Pavilion's been basically redone. A lot has changed. Let's maybe pick a new set of priority locations and try to focus on those, do a new assessment for those specific facilities. Like, for example, this building was listed in there. I'd have to go through that binder. I don't know how many of the items listed are things that are more areas that staff interacts with as opposed to the things that the general public interacts with. To me, the higher priority things would be items that the public interacts with. So a park and rec facility might be more important than a building that, for the most part, houses staff. But yet,
but there could be disabled staff, and so that's
right.
equally important.
Yeah.
Brian, can I butt in for a second? You mentioned on the slide $350,000 a year for ADA. We have never, ever seen where that money was spent. I think as a group here, we should be getting that information every year.
Yeah.
Looking at the city council budget is too confusing for any of us to understand what they're doing. But if you're spending over 3/4 or 1/3 of $1 million every year, where's it going? We don't know. So I would like to have that right away.
Chair Marston, I think that's a great suggestion. I could incorporate that into the ADA coordinator report every time we meet. Just, look at the budget, what have been the expenditures, and what's the plan. So
That would be great.
that's great. But this is really my last slide of presentation, and then I want to hear from the committee. So to help with the conversation, these are very ballpark cost estimates. I haven't talked to any
Sure.
consultants, but based on prior costs for similar things, I think that a complete redo of the ADA transition plan probably is going to be in the $500,000. Even, I'm sure there would be some proposals up to the $1 million threshold. So I think that's the range for that. If we're to just look at the 9 priority locations, maybe that's in the $100,000 ballpark. I think it would cost a little bit more if we select new priority locations that haven't been looked at in that level of detail, but roughly $150,000. At least we know it's less than the annual allotment, so it's a smaller bite of the apple. And then status quo, as I said, would be continue funding capital program. But as we heard from Chair Marston, I think there needs to be a little bit more interaction. Right now is budget season, so this is good timing today, both today and in our next regular quarterly meeting, to get input from the committee on prioritization. So that's really all that I have. I didn't want to get into a whole lot of detail of what this plan is, because to me that feels like we're looking backward, and I really want to focus on looking forward and hear from the committee, because I have say in this budget process. of, how much do we need and what do we need it for with, both with the Measure C funding and general fund capital programs. And now is definitely the time to receive input from the committee. And I can definitely include that in what we propose to the executive team for the city's capital program.
I have a question. So if you go back to that slide,
Yes.
the second option, update the 9 priority locations. My mind, it would be helpful to say, this is what we've accomplished. Is that, doing that finishing that spreadsheet would that be part of the step 2? I mean, would it be, we would still have to invest money in finishing that spreadsheet, and that would be part of the update to the 9 priority locations?
Yes, I think that would be an important first step in that, and depending on what comes back, maybe we've done a lot of work on a number of those priority locations, and we end up doing a little bit of a hybrid of options 2 and 3, where we say, okay,
Yeah.
we've got a little bit to finish up on this facility, but, now let's start thinking about what's the next high
Right, so
priority.
to me, it's hard to know what the next step is until we know where we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to point out that
Could we have the public comment first?
that's what
Nick?
I was going to bring up.
Yeah, that's okay.
And, as a housekeeping, we've had this agenda set for a couple weeks now, and it went out, at the minimum 24 hours. And I heard from a member of the public who wasn't able to get their public comment in time for it to be, part of the record. And I really feel it's important that we open this conversation to the broader disabled community. And I'm really struggling. As much as I want to move this forward, I feel we have an obligation to include the broader community before we vote on which direction we're taking this. And I'm really disappointed that the agenda was only given 24 hours notice. We've known about this meeting for weeks, and we could have been asking the public to come engage. And I heard from Elizabeth Sorgman, who's asked me to read her written public comment, which is, good morning, members of the Access Advisory Board. Having worked at the City of Santa Barbara for almost 17 years, I know it is extremely difficult to carve out time to get agendas out to the community earlier than what is required by law. But it is still critical for the city to work towards this goal, as it will encourage and foster community participation. I was only alerted to this meeting yesterday and was not able to attend because of prior commitments. I am advocating for a complete update to both the original 92 and 08 transition plans. Both reports reference outdated codes that may no longer be applicable. The latter references compliance with the 04 major accessibility updates in the state's effort to align the California building codes and the ADA accessibility requirements. There is a statement in the presentation that suggests much progress in 15 years. However, what type of documents can be provided to this board or to members of the public to substantiate that statement? In my years at the city building department, there was very little tracking of the accessibility progress being made. Lastly, it is ironic that we are stating, quote, much progress, unquote, has been made to only 9 projects within the city, when the city may own over 100 structures. At best, it can be stated that much progress has been made to 10% of the city-owned parcels. Omitted from the 08 transition plan were many parks, the beach, the harbor, and other recreational facilities that were critical during the pandemic and yet didn't make the priority list. What is clear is the code references cited in both 1992 and 2008 transition plans are outdated, with 90% of the city-owned parcels referencing standards that are grossly outdated. Perhaps a more comprehensive review of what the city has accomplished would help our city council and members of the Access Advisory Board paint a more realistic picture of where we stand as a city with our commitment to equity and equal access. Thank you, Elizabeth Sorgman, architect, certified access specialist, retired senior plans examiner.
Thank you, Nick and Elizabeth. Okay, now we can have some questions first. Committee questions.
Can I start, please?
Sure.
Okay. Being new to this committee for 1 year now, I was actually surprised and shocked that the City Hall elevator.
Karen, could you turn on your mic, please? Thank you.
Okay. I was surprised, this is Karen Luckett, I was surprised that the City Hall elevator is not accessible to wheelchairs. Is that correct?
Yes?
Yes, that's good.
That is correct. I struggle to use that elevator.
Okay, and that was identified 15 years ago?
It's in the 2008
Okay.
plan. It's probably in older documents than
Probably in
that
the
as well.
92 plan, too.
Yeah. But they have a permit to try and fix it, but these things take
I'm
time.
wondering if we can move that up to, can you access City Hall meetings?
Yeah, I can, and I have a wheelchair that's on the larger end of the spectrum, and that's the problem with that elevator, is it's pretty tight for some larger wheelchairs.
Do you know how wide it is in inches?
I don't have the specifications, but I can tell you I have to do like a 15-point turn to get into it.
Okay, because it's small?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It doesn't matter, the dimensions are too small for
Okay.
ADA
But
and
they,
CPC.
you know, it's in the works, right?
Yes.
And that's the case with many of these key facilities. They have been working towards a solution for many, many years.
Well, how do we go about bumping certain things like the City Hall up to a priority to get done in the next year or two?
So that's really when it comes down to the budgeting process. Things won't get done if funding is not applied to it. So as I mentioned, we're in the budget season right now. So if there are certain things either from this plan that we have already or something that's risen above all of that, because things change, and in 15 years, certainly things have changed, it would be good to get input from the committee. A lot of times, there's two different things we do in the budgeting process. Sometimes we just give an allotment of money for something that's just sort of general ADA improvements. But then something like City Hall, that's going to be way more than the $350,000. So
Okay, do we
that
know how much it will be, so you know
I-
how to ask in the budget?
for that project is funded.
It is funded.
Yes.
And so are the bathrooms at City Hall, and so is the,
And the reason they haven't
It just takes a long time to deliver a project in this community.
what does
But
that,
it did-
what does that mean, deliver? I don't know the lingo.
Design, construction, yeah, to complete the project. But it didn't become funded until fairly
Okay.
recently.
So if you or whoever just hires someone, do you hire like an outside firm and say, we want a bigger elevator, ADA, and we want the bathrooms redone? Is that the next?
We're
So-
actually beyond that step already. The architectural and engineering is already done, it's funded, and it's probably scheduled, right?
yes.
Yeah, I don't have an update specifically for that project, but it is making good progress.
I think-
Karen, so is the elevator at the library
But
after.
I think the question that I'm hearing beneath this, though, is if there's a future element like City Hall Library, or City Hall Elevator, two different elevator projects, I'm getting confused here. But if there's a future project like that, that the committee wants to see funded, how can they provide input on that? And the way it would happen, we prioritize projects based on a lot of different inputs, including what we hear from this committee. And as the executive team sits down and discusses the capital program for the next fiscal year, a lot of things are on that list. So I could recommend to the Public Works Director that we fund, whatever ADA improvement I'm hearing from this committee is of high importance. Probably talking, to our facilities manager to see do we have the staffing? Can we deliver this project in the timing? And then it competes with all the other asks. There's always more on that capital program list than we have funding for. But I can tell you that the ADA improvements have been taken very seriously. We're seeing the library elevator project is under construction right now. City Hall elevator is moving forward. Those are big capital investments. And we need to keep that pipeline going by continuing to look at our plan, our program, and making sure that we fund future projects. Because they won't, as I said, they won't get done without the funding.
So why can't we double the budget? Why can't you ask for a double budget and show them we have all these projects that need work on?
We could ask for more money. Every capital program manager is always asking for more money. So I think, there's always a balance there. But having a solid list that you can depend on more than what we have today, because we haven't been doing this, we don't have the database with what's completed, what's left. I think having that programmed, kind of like was attempted in 2008, can help. As you have to make the case for it.
It sounds to me like the first priority's got to be on understanding what has been accomplished or what has not been accomplished in terms of these 9, priority facilities. Because if we're going to literally cherry pick, 1 or 2 to focus on, and whether we, do it in a manner that says, look, we know we have 350,000 approved this year. We would also, this is such a priority, we want to pre-allocate next year's 350. It's a $700,000 project, and we know there won't be any money for ADA next year, but it's such a priority we want to do this. In order to even get to that discussion, I think we need to know what has or has not been accomplished from the prior priority list, so that we have an opportunity to say, well, those priorities are still today's priorities for tomorrow, or, these are, it's done. First of all, building number 7's no longer even there, whatever it may be.
Police department.
Yeah, but I don't know what number it is. But we need that information, I think, to be able to do anything like what you're requesting, which I think is
Right.
absolutely appropriate.
And that is going to cost money.
Yeah,
Or staff
That's
time.
the point,
yeah.
right?
Right, that's the 100,000, that was up
Right,
there in that item.
But I agree, we need to know where we are to know where we need to go. And I think Elizabeth sort of mentioned that in her statement at the end. If I don't remember exactly her words. But, yeah, so
And Brian, I was disappointed with your group of options here, because as we've talked about the last 6 months or more, the first thing is to get that spreadsheet and have that checked and see what the hell has been done, because we have no idea. You use the term "much has been done," but you
I'd
don't
like to
know.
quantify that.
You got over 3,000 items there, and no one knows. And many of them are very cheap, such as blue curb in front of the buildings, lowered counters. Last time I was at the city hall, there's still no lowered counters at the bill department. These things are not expensive. No one's done this, and I will just say this. This is nothing against Brian. He's new to this area. It's the city administrator who was never, ever focused on this. I was here working with Gilda back in 2007, 2008. Then I went away to the VA hospital to do some work, came back in 2013, rejoined the board, and started bringing up transition plan problems. That's almost, over 9 years now. And this is the first time we've actually been able to get in the weeds. The first we need to do is what is still not done from the 2008 plan. And also a question here, We had the 1992 self-evaluation. That's 30 years ago. Those things were supposed to be fixed in 30 years, and we haven't even looked at that.
And I think that this will be instructive to council and budgeting efforts to show, every time we have one of these reports, it seems to me that the report is, oh, everything's great. We've done a lot. Look at all this that we've done. But when you put it into the context of how much needs to be done, it really looks like a very little amount.
Yes.
And we need to increase budgeting drastically if we're ever going to get ahead of this.
And Nick and I had a talk with city administrator over probably 2 years ago now. And I mentioned up two things. One was training for the ADA liaisons in each department, which she agreed to, but I haven't seen anything. But the other thing is, there's nobody in charge of this. And I think Brian will have to admit that since 2009, there's been nobody whose job it is to keep this schedule. The ADA says you must have a schedule and a cost estimate and then keep track of what's been fixed. We have not done that. Now, if you read the ADA, it says that's the job of the ADA coordinator. But I will bet that you were never told that was your job when you started. I'm sure Ashley was not told that, or Mike Wilshire. They could give this title out, and you've done good with our groups. We appreciate that a lot. But the ADA law says the ADA coordinator is in charge of this, and you're the damn city engineer. You don't have time to do this in addition to everything else you're doing. We need to have someone from the administrator's office be in charge of this. They have the way to get the money. This is a federal law that we're ignoring completely. It needs to have a yearly update, and all those items have to be said. If it's fixed, fine. If it's not, what date can we fix it? And we don't have that, and never have. So before we look at these four things to do, of course, we'd all like to have a total new transition plan. But seeing how the city works, we're going to have another box of stuff with no one following through. If you don't have the staff available to actually work on the transition plan, there's no sense in spending another $500,000 or more for a new transition plan. Which, and Elizabeth is right, many of these codes used here are not applicable anymore. But
Yeah.
if we do that and just spend the money, and when we find it in a year or two, then we have just a bunch of paperwork that no one follows through on. We need to have the city administrator's office. They're the ones responsible for this. Otherwise, the DOJ could get involved. We don't want to have that. I say for myself anyway, but nothing's been done. No one's ever did this thing. And when you say 5 or 6 years ago, there was a,
Jim, can I ask why you don't want the DOJ involved? I'm increasingly of a mind that that's the only way
Well-
we're going to get anywhere.
that's my problem. I don't like to bring litigation in, and it would really screw up the city, but they need to know that they're one step away from that. We have so much facts here about what hasn't been done correctly on the ADA that it would be a slam dunk for the DOJ to get involved. And then it's a lot of work that they make the city do. So if you want to go ahead and do it, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to do it myself, but I'm getting frustrated just like everybody else is. We have not paid attention to what the law says about an ADA plan. There's no one in charge of it, even though technically Brian is, but he doesn't know that. But you said let me finish this, Nick. 5 or 6 years ago, you said somebody did put together a nice checklist, right?
Yes.
Nothing's been done with that in 5 or 6 years. So these are just pie-in-the-sky statements. When that checklist was done, someone should have started checking and saying what's been done. And many of these things are very small.
I've got a list of examples of those kind of small things that this
Let's
really,
hear about those.
really low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
I went through the 9 priority locations, and you could cross the police station off the list, right? If you go back a couple slides, you bring up, keep going. You bring up, the much progress in 15 years. Airport terminal, well, that would have been required with the updates that had nothing to do with accessibility. That wasn't even on the ADA transition plan. That's, You know, any new, I mean, it wasn't on the 9 key priority. I don't know what's in those 3 boxes because we can't get access to it. The Cabrillo Pavilion was done, but there's still numerous problems there that were in the ADA transition plan that didn't get addressed and were required to be addressed during that construction. The elevator is not available to the public. The wayfinding signage is not correct. There's numerous issues there that were apparent in just a casual walkthrough without any measurements or anything. And the sidewalk access ramp, I think that's where a lot of our ADA transition plan money is going, and I don't think it should be. I think that those access ramps are largely going to, should be covered under the general street improvement. Every time we have a chip and seal, that has to be upgraded under state law, and it shouldn't. I object to that being the bulk of our ADA transition plan funding.
Nick, remember that the Measure C, we were promised that money, if we voted for
Yeah.
it, was to go to
Yeah,
ADA.
we were
So
duped
I do want
into
to
supporting
clarify
measure.
on that point. The $350,000 is Measure C money allocated for ADA transition plan improvements. That has not been used for the street improvements for the access ramps. We have kept that.
Okay, well, I'd like
separate.
to see an accounting so I know where that money's going. And so if I look at the transition plan on the, which I did recently on those 9 priority facilities, I found there are a number of issues that are common to nearly all of them that seem to be easily remedied. Every one of those key facilities noted a lack of tree grates in the public right-of-way. And Mr. Dewey has proven FlexiPave to be viable, and every one of those should be filled with FlexiPave this year, in my opinion. There's a lack of on-street accessible parking zones noted at every one of those facilities. And again, we've recently demonstrated that, you know, it just takes a little bit of blue paint and it's cheap. It's not a big deal. Why haven't we done it? Loading zones, similarly. You know, there was a resistance to these accessible parking and loading zones because the legal team was concerned that you couldn't make those changes without making it fully accessible, and we seem to be past that. So we need to be putting out those blue and white curbs. There's a lack of required tactile braille signage at all of these facilities. And then picnic tables. It was noted at many of these facilities that the staff picnic tables were not accessible. And I would like to see, you know, a surveying. That should be a simple project. The 9 facilities, do they still have picnic tables? And if they do, are they accessible? These are really inexpensive quick fixes that, you know, would give you more things to check off that 3,500 piece list. But, you know, again, it's probably only about 36 items. But if I see 4 at 9 facilities. I'd really like to see an update to the schedule. I mentioned the capital improvement at the Cabrillo Arts where there's unaddressed transition plan items. I guess that's it for my notes on that. I want to see more public engagement. You know, I want to see this, I want everybody to be aware of what's going on because I think that's going to lead to more funding. And in detail, you know, how, I know it doesn't behoove staff to show how badly this has been handled, but we need to.
If I may, Chair Marsden, I'd like to make a motion that we endorse the $100,000 proposed update to know where we currently stand on what has or has not been accomplished on the 9 former priority facilities.
I'd entertain some discussion on that matter.
You just got to second it, and then that's what happens.
Okay, I will second.
Which one is that?
Update to 9
Do we-
priority locations, 100,000. The middle one, right there. Update to 9 priority
And
locations.
as I mentioned earlier, these are really ballpark numbers, but if
Yep.
I get the sense that the committee is willing to make a motion
Yep.
and pass this, then we can get more detail on actual cost and report that next
Well,
time.
let me ask Brian what he means by update to those. You talking about bringing in an expert to update and go through all those 9 places? Or are you talking about just, what I think we should do is first finish off your checklist.
I agree. I think that's part of the update. I see 2 phases to the update. One, see what's been done. Check it off, see what's still to be done, see what's obsolete, like the police station. There may be other things like that. There may be, small buildings that we're not aware of that have been demolished by now.
The update, to the 9 priority locations in my mind is exactly that.
Yeah.
And more, it's also, once we know what has or has not been done, then we should have the opportunity to, in essence, reprioritize, or from today, 25 years after that was done in 2008, or 15 years, however many years, it's been a lot of years, we should, this committee, now in real time, should be able to provide input to you and the city on what are today's priorities. So
Yep.
we can, get rid of the police department and other small things that, but I think in terms of the motion, that's the intent of the motion. First things first, let's figure out where we are.
Yep, and what's left to do. And then I think the other.
And I think we should be given the opportunity to recommend our new priorities, how we would reprioritize today.
I agree. And I think that as part of this update, we need to go through and bring it all up to current building code. We can't be leaving this with, 30-year-old code requirements.
Of course, I think
Yeah.
I would say that goes without saying, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
let's say it.
Well, that sounds great, but again, my fear is it's going to be another group of boxes sitting there that no one has the staff time or
Well, what
money
do
to-
you think we should do?
I would like to, first of all, go through this list. If you
That's what we
said
just
much
said.
has been
That's what we're
fixed-
saying. That's exactly what we're saying.
Well, see, update means hiring a cast to come in here and do a complete
Yeah.
update of the 9 places.
And-
That's different. That's what current-
No,
No,
not,
we
that's a
disagree.
complete update. That's the $500,000 first line item. We're saying update to the existing.
Here,
I understand that, but it
And-
says update, okay? That means hiring someone to
Yeah,
go.
we do want to hire someone, and I would recommend that we hire one of the previously employed cast members that the city has let go because they have increased familiarity with these
less
projects.
Less of a learning curve.
Yeah, less learning
I
curve.
agree with that.
What?
I agree with having someone inform, who's a cast,
Yeah.
who knows the
There are
city.
3 previous city employees who are now working CASPs and could be consulted and should be, because they were driven out because they wanted to make this happen.
Well, with 7 minutes left, I'd like to call for the motion, unless there's any further discussion.
I had a couple things. Number one, can we at all look at the last 3 years' budget and what that money was spent on?
Yes, absolutely. I can bring that
Okay.
to the next meeting. I'm trying to remember when that is scheduled.
February 24 or something?
Yes.
Yep, and we do have a really good tool online, a transparency tool. It's probably not going to allow you to drill down to the very fine detail. It'll just show that there was an expenditure, but I don't think it'll allow you to see that it was, to a certain contractor for a certain project. I can compile that.
Okay, all right. So the last 3 years of, would you say, we
Sure.
can look at?
Yeah.
And also, on these 9 priorities, I want to say, after hearing Elizabeth's comments, this is a dinosaur. This is archaic. This is 15-year-old codes that have been updated 15 times
Yeah.
since, okay?
No, it hasn't been updated at all.
No.
The code.
no, the codes
The code,
have.
sure.
Yeah.
This has not.
Yes.
So this is like pretty
Yeah.
much useless.
Well,
It sounds like,
I
other
think
than
I
naming
think it
9.
gives us an outline. I think that it does have some value instead of starting fresh and sending some unfamiliar CASP out into the wild to try and figure out the
Okay,
spots.
correct.
This is a good structure. This is like, we've identified these key facilities. Are they still key? Is there,
Okay.
something that needs to be added? I think if there's anything new, it should be already up to code because it was built by current standards, right?
Yeah, but the specifics of the 3,000 and something are not applicable today. Okay?
Maybe.
Okay, but what I think is applicable is that no one's done anything with that thing. We spent the money. and
But
if this-
that's spilt milk.
Pardon?
That's spilt milk. That's the past.
Well,
We're
no,
looking
no,
on
we
forward.
can still do something with it, right? I
Okay.
think that's the point.
So what I'm hearing is police station, I mean, we had them talk, and they did say they would let a cast person look at their plan before they finalize it, because they didn't include any parking whatsoever underground for employees.
Right, they
Okay.
goofed up terribly.
So
on that.
hopefully they do have a cast person look over. The airport is there any way we can give the list that's 5-year-old, the checklist, to the architect or the contractor and say, listen, is this project accessible in all these areas? And they can just checklist it themselves. Right? They know the plan, they have the design. Why do we have to hire a consultant for $10,000 just to check out something that this builder or architect
Because the
can do in
city
10
can't
minutes?
keep employees.
And Commissioner Luckett, when we have an existing designer under contract, like we do for there's some work that's in design at the airport right now, we can work with them as we had the conversation with the team for the police station. But what we're trying to do now with this plan is existing facilities. And so we don't have anybody under contract who we can just say, go tell us if this facility's in compliance. That's why we do these transition plan updates. The latest information that we had was from 2008, and what we're talking about today is how to go about updating that by being fiscally conscious and not necessarily creating 3 more binders. And I think that's where it sounds like I'm hearing the committee's landing on, let's use that list. We know it's out, it's old and codes have changed, but let's at least just see what's been done, what hasn't been done. And then that'll be the first report back to the committee. And maybe priorities, based on that information, priorities might shuffle around a little bit where we see, okay, this facility still needs a lot of work. Let's concentrate fiscal year 2024 ADA transition plan update money on that facility based on what we now know and get it done. Like make it all done.
Right,
And I would
because,
suggest strongly that you try to talk to the city attorney and also city administrator and tell them that we are at our rope's end and we need to have funding for staff, because it's one thing to say we don't have the staff to do it, but it just sits there for 15 years. So can you get the city attorney and Rebecca Bjork involved and say, we have to do this. The law says you must do this. There must be someone in charge. We must keep a schedule, and we must put down what's been fixed. And as I've said many times before, we don't even take the time to brag about what we have fixed, such as the stairs at the back of the library. That was on the plans, notified as a violation. It's been fixed, but no one ever has said, oh, we fixed that, we fixed this, we fixed Mackenzie Park after Nick got involved. We don't even have a list of things we have fixed, so that needs to be done first.
All right, well, I'll just say to that, Chair Marston, that, as ADA coordinator, that's my responsibility, and if I don't have the resources to get done what I think we need to get done, then it's also my responsibility to elevate and ask for additional resources. And I am pleased that we're moving in a direction that is more programmatic and it's more forward-looking. That's going to be a real shift, but in order to make actual progress, we may need more resources than have been asked for in the past.
I agree
And
with
I'm-
that.
Yeah.
I would like to encourage you to get very aggressive in seeking resources.
okay,
And to be on your side, I think you should let them know you're in the middle of this. Your job is to do this, but you don't have the funding. And that funding doesn't come from you, it comes from up above. And they have not, even though they always tell us, oh, we're 100% ADA accessible, and we want to be, they're not doing anything, so,
Let's take a vote on the motion.
okay.
Let's make the motion so we can vote.
Can you repeat?
Update
Yeah.
the 9 priority locations for approximately $100,000.
And can we,
Excuse me, could you repeat the motion into a microphone, please?
I'm, before we state and vote, do we agree that we should try to engage one of the previously employed CASP?
Personally,
That's not our scope of practice, I don't
yeah,
think.
I think it's for us to recommend a course of action. If you want to add that as a friendly amendment to the motion, I'll accept it. I don't think it's necessary. And I think we're telling the city that we're recommending that they update the 9 priority locations. And we've got an estimate that it's going to take, approximately $100,000, although we don't know. That'll go out to bid. And then it's out of our hands. They do that, or they don't do it, and
Yeah.
it's with, we can,
That's
recommend that we include a former CASP.
Okay, I'll pull it as a friendly amendment and maybe make it as a second proposal.
If I can jump in, I would just say it would be appropriate for the committee if they wanted to include that a CASP was an integral part of that update.
So that's a given.
But, well, it should be. But I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate to get into specifics of the who, it really narrows that field, and
Yeah.
our job as,
But it would really have an impact on the cost.
It would seem to us to be the smart thing to do, but we're going to leave it to the city to do the smart thing.
Okay, fine. I'll
So-
drop it.
Yeah, the motion would be to recommend updating the 9 priority locations in the ADA transition, update of 2008, and strongly recommend that somebody with a CASP certification be included in that process.
Can we put in the words, review the former 208 and then update? I want to make sure they don't start from scratch. They should review what's been done.
That's going to take like a
No,
couple hundred hours to go
I just
through.
want them to update. How can you update it if you're not reviewing? It's the same. To me, that's redundant. I want them to update the ADA transition report from 2008 with regard to the 9 priority locations.
Okay,
And it's clear that part of that update clear to staff, part of that update would be to report back on what's been done, and that it would include bringing all of the recommendations up to today's code. Is that understood?
not sure it is. So bringing all of the recommendations, so a plan of action to
Well,
bring those
look,
up
look,
to
if we're
today's
gonna
code, or
if we're going to review the transition plan, I don't want to just move forward under the 2008 building code. I want to make sure that each item that is reviewed, if it's still deemed necessary, it's reviewed to today's standard.
right.
And that those 9 priorities have probably gone down to 5 because of the new buildings of Cabrillo Airport,
Yeah,
police
well.
and such.
I don't know about that.
the airport was never on the list.
Yeah,
Whatever the 9 locations were
yeah,
at that time
yeah,
should be updated so that we know what has or has not been done.
yeah.
Period. I mean, it's just, this is not that complicated in my mind, folks. That information will help us tremendously, and again, I'd like to call for the vote.
Did we get a second? Sorry.
Yes, I
Okay.
seconded.
Do we do roll call?
Sure.
Who usually?
Suzanne Tejada,
Aye.
Michael Rasler,
Aye.
Karen Luckett,
Aye.
Nick Kuntz,
Aye.
Chair James Marston.
Aye.
motion carries, and that brings us to the end.
I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
We are adjourned. Thank you for your time, folks. I appreciate it.